Okay, let's unpack.
Let's do it.
For the past, decade or more, we've been living in this huge, sprawling experiment called the internet, where at least in theory, you could choose to be, a name, an avatar, maybe just a ghost floating between servers. Anonymity was kind of the default setting for a lot of...
It felt that way, didn't it?
But based on the really expensive source material we are diving into today, that whole era of comfortable, almost assumed anonymity, it looks like it's rapidly approaching a pretty hard stop.
That's absolutely right. What you, our listener, have brought to the table here is, it's a truly chilling analysis when you put it all together.
Yeah.
It points to this convergence of factors.
Yeah.
And it paints a really worrying high-resolution picture.
How so?
You've got the aggressive integration of artificial intelligence into, pretty much every digital space now.
Everywhere.
Then there's this global legislative push for universal digital identity systems. We're seeing that pop up in various forms. And underpinning it all is this concerted effort by governments and corporations who seem absolutely determined to eliminate essential privacy tools.
Chief among them,
the virtual private networks, or VPNs. They're right in the crosshairs.
So our mission today, it's really focused, isn't it? We need to try and cut through the rhetoric, particularly the safety rhetoric.
The protecting the children angle.
Exactly. And look at the actual real-world legislative threats to online anonymity.
Okay.
We're comparing two specific high-profile efforts mentioned in the sources. There's the UK's sprawling, really complicated Online Safety Act.
The OSA, yeah.
And then, almost unbelievably, this incredibly far-reaching bill proposed in the U.S. state of Michigan.
That one is quite something.
We need to explore the specific mechanisms, how they actually work or intend to work.
Right.
And more importantly, I think, what happens when the tools designed to protect your privacy, like VPNs, get caught in the crosshairs of what looks like a pretty comprehensive surveillance agenda.
You're looking at a system, based on this analysis, that's seeking the ultimate trifecta.
Which is?
Control, monitoring, and monetization. Those seem to be the driving forces.
Control, monitoring, monetization.
Yeah. Every piece of legislation, every new tech advance, it seems geared toward dissolving those gray areas of the internet, the anonymous spaces. When you really analyze the goals laid out in these proposed laws, you're kind of forced to ask the question that one of our sources posed. Are we rapidly approaching what they termed the end-stage internet?
End-stage internet. Wow.
Meaning a completely regulated digital ecosystem where your online life becomes essentially just one giant blob of spyware.
That's a stark image. Okay, let's dive in. Let's start across the pond then with the UK. Because their Online Safety Act, the OSA, that seems to be the definitive legislative framework that really dragged VPNs into this current, very heated debate.
It really is. And it's designed, ostensibly at least, to protect children from online harms. That's the stated goal.
But the methods.
The methods. That's where it gets complicated. They're causing massive structural ripple effects for, every single adult user in the country, not just kids.
So what kind of restrictions are we talking about here?
We're talking extremely significant, almost unprecedented restrictions on digital platforms that serve UK citizens.
Right.
Like a framework that includes what is functionally a potential porn ban, and that term itself is vague and could cover a lot.
Potentially very broad.
Very broad. And critically, mandatory age verification. Plus, potential digital ID requirements for a massive array of online services.
So platforms have to check ages now.
The Act demands that platforms must, in effect, ensure that children cannot access content deemed harmful or inappropriate. And the burden of proof, the responsibility, is placed squarely on the platforms themselves.
That sounds like a huge technical and legal challenge for them.
It is. And we're already seeing the consequences of these demands hitting some absolutely massive platforms, which really shows you the kind of financial and legal weight this legislation carries.
Which platforms specifically?
Well, the sources point to services that are really pillars of modern digital life. Think the Xbox games console, the global chat service Discord.
Huge user base there?
Absolutely. And even the hugely popular gaming creation platform Roblox.
Wow.
All of these are reportedly being forced to require users to prove their age just to continue using their account, often involving, intrusive third-party verification services, sending off copies of ID, that sort of thing.
That's a big shift from just clicking, I am over 18.
A massive shift. And it's not just the industry giants feeling the pressure either.
Oh.
The consequence for platforms that refuse or maybe just simply cannot comply with the logistical nightmare of setting up robust age verification, it's often total surrender.
Meaning they just pull out.
Exactly. The sources highlight the really dramatic move by the image hosting service Imager.
Oh, I know Imager. Been around forever.
Right. A long-standing global service. They chose to block access entirely to UK users rather than even attempt to comply with the new age gate. demands required by the legislation.
That's a powerful statement, isn't it?
It's a huge financial statement about the complexity and the intrusiveness of these new rules. They're effectively saying, look, the UK market, big as it is simply not worth the legal risk or the logistical headache of implementing this kind of centralized ID system.
So the internet is becoming less global, more fragmented because of laws like this?
That seems to be the effect, yes. But here's where the problem really begins for the UK regulators.
Okay.
And this is why the VPN discussion suddenly went from being a kind of technical curiosity for nerds
right.
to an immediate, almost existential threat to the OSA itself.
Why? How do VPNs fit in?
Well, because VPNs, by their very nature, their core function, are designed to defeat geographic restrictions and regulatory boundaries.
Right. They make it look like you're somewhere else.
Precisely. By using a VPN, a UK user can immediately spoof their IP address and location, make it appear as if they're connecting from outside the UK, say from the US or Germany or wherever.
And that means?
That instantly allows them to circumvent the new age assurance measures that Imager or other restricted sites have put in place specifically for UK connections.
So this single, fairly simple technical workaround, it immediately punches a massive hole in the entire legislative goal of the OSA.
Exactly. If the core goal is mandatory age verification for all UK citizens accessing certain content, and a VPN allows a UK citizen to just pretend they are not in the UK,
then the law becomes structurally ineffective.
Totally undermined. The whole multi-billion-pound effort, potentially, to implement age verification is just sidestepped.
Okay, I see the conflict now. So what's the government's response? Are they banning VPNs?
Well, this is what leads to the political tightrope walk they're on.
Yeah.
We know what the current official stance is, as reported by the UK tech minister.
That is.
The minister stated clearly that while, and this phrase is important, nothing is off the table in terms of restricting internet access for the purpose of child safety.
Nothing is off the table. That sounds ominous.
It is chilling in its implications for digital freedom. But, the minister continued, they currently have no current plans to ban VPNs.
Why not, if it undermines their big law?
Because they recognize, or at least state they recognize, that VPNs have many vital, legitimate use.
Like what?
Well, think about journalists reporting from sensitive areas, businesses managing global networks securely, remote workers connecting to corporate intranet, or just privacy-conscious citizens wanting basic security on public Wi-Fi.
Right. Banning them would cause huge collateral damage.
Exactly. If they ban VPNs, they simultaneously cripple all those legitimate activities. It's a huge own goal.
But that phrase, nothing is off the table, that's the political escape clause, isn't it? That's the bit that lingers from the source material.
Absolutely. It explicitly suggests that while they're holding back now due to the legitimate uses and potential backlash, the moment a specific public crisis occurs, or there's a major political push, or maybe just the right media narrative, that table might just flip right over.
They've essentially reserved the legislative right to act later.
Precise. The door's deliberately left open.
Yeah.
Hashtag 1.3, debating the extent of child VPN.
Okay, so if they might want to ban VPNs later, presumably they need a justification, right? They need evidence.
Exactly. To justify any future politically very risky ban, the government needs substantial, ideally undeniable evidence that this bypass mechanism, the VPN, is widely used by the target demographic they claim to be protecting children.
Right. They need to show kids are actually using VPNs to get around the rules.
And here we run straight into conflicting claims and, frankly, a lot of political rhetoric. It really highlights just how sensitive and politically charged this whole debate has become.
What are the conflicting claims?
Well, on one hand, you had prominent figures in the House of Lords, like Baroness Liz Lloyd, warning that there was actually limited evidence on children's use of VPNs, specifically to circumvent these new UK rules and filters.
So she's saying the panic might be overblown.
Her caution suggests that, yes, that the widespread usage being perhaps cited by proponents of a ban is not yet substantiated by hard data.
So the political motive for restricting anonymity might currently outweigh the actual evidence of harm from kids using VPNs.
That's one interpretation, yes. But conversely, you have the Liberal Democrat technology spokesperson in the Lords who actually brought a motion regarding this issue, countering with the claim that the use of VPNs by children was, in fact, widespread.
Okay, so the opposite claim, widespread use.
Exactly, and the argument is direct. If usage is widespread, then the entire age assurance regime, the core of the OSA's child safety measures, fails before it even properly starts.
And
therefore, the VPN must be controlled, perhaps banned, to save the law itself.
That creates this intense legislative pressure cooker for the government, doesn't it?
Absolutely. They're caught. On one side, they want to maintain the legal integrity and effectiveness of the OSA, which was a massive political undertaking for them.
Right.
But on the other side, they absolutely do not want to alienate a huge percentage of the adult population, including businesses who use VPNs for completely legitimate reason, entirely unrelated to accessing adult content.
It's a bind.
It is. And that is precisely why the sources emphasize that the government is actively looking to address this evidence gap.
They need proof.
They desperately need proof. Or perhaps just overwhelming political momentum driven by a moral panic to justify a move that would be widely seen as a severe infringement on digital liberties.
And a blow to the UK's image.
A major blow to the UK's reputation as a, digitally free and open nation. If they can definitively prove widespread malicious use by minors to bypass safety filters, the political calculation changes instantly. The door to that ban swings wide open. #Tag 1.4, the risk of overreach and collateral damage.
Okay, beyond the immediate fight over age gates for, say, commercial, the sources raise a much deeper, maybe more insidious.
Yes. The inevitable collateral damage caused by legislative overreach.
What do you mean by that?
When you implement a blanket age-gating solution that requires a verifiable digital ID or robust age check, you don't just hit the intended targets, like porn sites.
Right.
You start affecting crucial, non-harmful content that needs to be accessed freely, often by vulnerable individuals who most need anonymity.
This is where that narrative of safety starts down, is you see the potential true cost of the censorship.
Precisely. And the list of content types cited in the sources as being at high risk is incredibly important to scrutinize here.
What kind of content?
We're talking about sites dealing with political debate and activism, essential educational resource, pure information repositories like, say, Wikipedia.
Okay.
And maybe most crucially, support forums dealing with deeply sensitive personal issues like LGBTQ+ rights, domestic abuse support, or sexual health and reproductive information.
Wow. So think about the massive fundamental irony there.
It's huge. The law is meant to protect children and vulnerable people, but it risks limiting a young person's anonymous access to vital, non-commercial, potentially life-saving health or support information online.
So if a teenager, maybe questioning their identity or needing health advice, has to first submit a verifiable digital ID just to access a support forum,
they might just choose to remain silent and isolated. They won't risk exposure, which fundamentally undermines the stated goal of protecting the vulnerable.
Did anyone raise this during the legislative process?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Lord Clement Jones raised this exact point as a major risk during the passage of the act. He argued that inappropriate age gating would act as a massive chilling effect on necessary public dialogue and access to support.
The legislative dragnet is just too wide then.
It seems so. When you tie access to any information to a mandatory digital ID and age verification, you fundamentally change the nature of inquiry itself.
How so?
For many people, seeking sensitive information, whether it's about political dissent, reproductive rights, sexual health, mental health, the requirement to link that search history, that browsing activity, to a verifiable government ID is a massive obstacle. It effectively punishes anonymity.
The moment you have to tie your most private, maybe most vulnerable searches, your official identity, you just stop searching, honestly, don't you?
You do, or you find ways around it, which brings us back to VPN. But if those are banned...
And then freedom of thought and inquiry is slowly eroded, all in the name.
That's the fear articulated in the sources, yes.
Yeah.
#Tag 1.5.
Speaking of information access and that collateral damage, one of the most, explosive nuggets from our source is the reaction from Wikipedia founder Jimmy Wales regarding the OSA.
Ah, yes. This sets up a truly high-stakes confrontation between a sovereign government and arguably one of the world's most critical, universally accessed information resources.
It really does. And Wales, he pulled no punches.
Not at all. He called the Online Safety Act very poorly thought out legislation, flat out.
That's not just a mild corporate critique saying we have concerns.
No, this is a public figure, the guy who built the largest collaborative knowledge repository in human history, taking a hard, definitive stance against a major piece of sovereign legislation. He's essentially calling it incompetent and dangerous.
But the real commitment, the line in the sand that sets up this potential showdown is what?
It's this. Wales stated definitively, publicly, that Wikipedia will not be age-gating Wikipedia under any circumstances.
Wow. So a flat refusal.
A flat refusal to comply with the key age verification requirement of the Act. A requirement then, as we discussed, platforms like Discord and Xbox are already bending to.
Okay, so that refusal means the UK government has a very difficult, politically really charged choice to make.
Extremely difficult. If Wikipedia holds firm and refuses to implement age gates for UK users, then the next logical step for the UK government, if they want to maintain the legal integrity and enforcement of their own law, would be to compel internet service providers, the BTs, the Virgins, the Skies, to block access to Wikipedia entirely for UK residents.
Block Wikipedia? Seriously?
That would be the enforcement mechanism consistent with the law's requirement.
We have to just stop and consider the global implications of that for a second. That action would be, well, in modern history, it feels like an unprecedented block on a global information source by a major West.
It would be huge. It would instantly put the UK in the company of regimes known for aggressive internet censorship: China, Iran, Russia.
The political fallout internationally would be immense. It would severely damage the UK's rep stage for open access.
As the sources point out, this is shaping up to be a really interesting showdown.
Interesting is one word for it. Does a major democratic government actually block access to the world's largest nonprofit encyclopedia over an age-gate dispute?
The fact that we even have to seriously ask that question demonstrates the severe, chilling extent of this legislative reach.
Yeah.
And it highlights just how much power the government is seeking to assert over what its citizens are allowed to access online, what information is deemed safe or appropriate.
And this example, this Wikipedia standoff, it feels like the perfect bridge, doesn't it, to the broader global context you mentioned earlier?
Absolutely. This localized fight over Wikipedia access, over Imgur shutting down UK access, over Discord requiring age verification, these aren't just isolated battles happening in the UK.
They're symptoms.
They're all localized symptoms of a much bigger, seemingly coordinated ideological battle for digital control that's happening worldwide.
Okay, so let's zoom out then. The UK's specific legislation, the OSA, while concerning on its own, the source is presented as just one battlefront in a much broader global trend.
That's the argument, yes. The core concern cited across the material you provided is this accelerating convergence of tracking technology.
Convergence, meaning different types of tracking working together.
Exactly. All leading fundamentally to the potentially irreversible loss of anonymity across the entire digital ecosystem.
Yeah.
Not just in one country, but globally.
It's this feeling, this narrative in the sources that the internet is moving rapidly away from being a place of, messy, chaotic, but fundamentally open exploration to becoming a highly managed, tracked, and centrally controlled environment. Yeah. And the sources use that term "end stage internet," describing it as ultimately becoming one giant blob of spyware. We need to unpack what that actually means.
Okay. The end stage internet, as defined or implied in these analyses, it's characterized by several things.
Like
zero hidden corner, no more anonymity by default, complete data fidelity, meaning every action you take online is recorded, stored, and accurately attributable directly to you.
Not just an anonymous user ID.
No, to your verifiable identity. And, crucially, the elimination of all effective tools of dissent or anonymity, like VPNs, like encrypted communication, that can't be backdoored.
Okay. And the underlying goals driving this transformation, according to the source, you mentioned the trifecta.
Right. Control, universal monitoring, and hyper-precise monitoring.
Getting individuals to buy stuff.
Getting individuals to buy stuff that the internet follows them around relentlessly to sell at maximum efficiency based on that universal monitoring. But the control aspect feels primary in much of the analysis.
And this whole problem is being magnified exponentially now, isn't it? Because this isn't just about simple static tracking cookies anymore, like the old days.
Not at all. We are talking about the systematic, algorithmic injection of artificial intelligence into every single aspect of the internet experience.
How does AI change the game?
AI is the engine that processes the raw tracking data. It connects previously disparate dots about your behavior, your contacts, your location, your purchase, and it builds a comprehensive behavioral profile that is probably more detailed, certainly more predictive than you could ever build of yourself.
That's a scary thought.
Think about the types of AI involved here. We're talking sophisticated predictive analytics, forecasting your next purchase, maybe your next vote, maybe your next controversial web search before you even make it.
Right.
We're talking sophisticated behavioral modeling, AI that analyzes your typing speed, your mouse movements, even the pauses in your reading on a web page to gauge your emotional state, your focus, your susceptibility to influence.
Wow.
So that converges ubiquitous tracking from devices and platforms, plus sophisticated AI analysis, plus a move towards centralized identity. That's the combination that really dissolves anonymity.
The moment you're online, the system's insistence is absolute. We need to know exactly who you are, what you are doing right now, and what you are likely to do next.
That seems to be the direction of travel described.
Yeah.
Hashtag Tag 2.2, the threat of a global digital ID.
And this overwhelming fear of losing anonymity, it seems directly tied to a very specific, almost existential prediction outlined in the source material.
Yes. The emergence of a universal tracking system, often referred to globally in various initiatives under banners like digital number or digital ID.
Okay, what is that exactly?
This is the prediction, or perhaps the stated plan in some circles, that over time, every individual on the planet will be assigned a permanent, verifiable digital number.
Like a global social security number?
Exactly, likened to a global social security number or maybe a digital passport ID, something universally recognized and required.
And this isn't just about logging into websites easily with one account, Google or Facebook log.
The sources frame it as much, much more than convenience. It's potentially the ultimate control mechanism for social and economic function in the future.
How so? What's the stated fear?
The stated fear, articulated very strongly by those fighting these legislative measures and tech trends, is that without this centralized digital number, you will eventually be unable to function in modern society.
That sounds extreme.
The source material even uses that almost biblical echo, being unable to buy or sell or go anywhere without this digital mark.
So the real-world implication is total dependency on a centralized digital identity controlled by who? Government, corporation.
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
But the implication is dependent. If every transaction you make, every website you visit, every message you send, maybe even every physical movement tracked by your phone is tied back to that single global number.
Then you have zero ability to dissent anonymously.
Or explore sensitive topics privately.
Or even just exist quietly without leaving a permanent, verifiable data trail.
Exactly. You risk financial or social exclusion if your profile flags you as undesirable or non-compliant in some way.
We can already see templates for this, can't we? Like the social credit systems being implemented or trialed in certain authoritarian states.
Precisely. Those systems demonstrate how a centralized digital identity can be used to control behavior through exclusion, through limiting access to services, travel, even jobs, based on your digital score.
So the power held by the entity, whoever they are, that control that global ID database, it's potentially absent.
That's the core fear. We're discussing a fundamental, potentially catastrophic shift in the power dynamic, away from the individual, towards the centralized state, or perhaps a consortium of global corporations.
And that is why privacy tools like VPNs are viewed as so existentially important by their defenders.
Exactly. In this context, they're seen as potentially the only tool left that allows an individual to create some separation between their online activity and that all-encompassing digital number, the only way to operate outside its direct gaze.
Now, what's interesting and I think balanced here is that the sources seem careful to separate the technology itself from the actual ethical danger.
Yes, that's a key distinction they make. The argument presented isn't that AI is inherently evil or that the internet itself is bad and should be abandoned.
So it's not Luddite, anti-technology.
No, not necessarily. The core assertion is that technology is essentially morally neutral. It's a tool. The danger lies in who's controlling the AI, who's controlling the internet infrastructure, the pipes, the servers, the platforms.
It's about who has access to your data.
And crucially, what they can compel you or others to do with that access. That's where the fear really resides.
Technology is just a tool, but when that tool is specifically designed to centralize power and information on a global scale,
it becomes inherently vulnerable to massive systematic abuse. That's the argument.
Why do the sources argue that this secondary goal you mentioned, control, might actually be the primary goal driving these legislative measures, more so than safety or monetization? If we assume good intent, maybe the OSA just went a bit too far trying to protect.
The sources urge us to look beyond the stated intent, the public justification, precisely because these restrictions on anonymity, on content, on encryption are being implemented so consistently under the guise of security and safety.
That's the narrative that sells it to the public.
Oh, we must limit anonymity to protect the vulnerable. It's an unassailable moral argument. Who wants to argue against protecting children?
Nobody.
But the inevitable secondary effect, which the sources argue is actually the primary desired outcome for some actors, is the chilling of political dissent, the erosion of privacy, and ultimately the establishment of more effective social control.
History teaches us that any power structure that knows everything about its subjects
is inevitably tempted to abuse that knowledge.
Yeah.
Or, even if the current regime is benevolent, the next one might not be, and the tools of surveillance will be waiting.
So if the government, or maybe a powerful corporation, has absolute verifiable knowledge of everything you do online tied to your real identity, that power is ripe
for abuse, not just by them, but by hackers, by foreign powers, by anyone who can gain access to that centralized system.
So privacy tools like VPNs become essential not just for personal data security against, say, identity,
but as a critical check against this inherent risk of government and corporate overreach, a structural safeguard for democracy.
Therefore, the restrictions on VPNs, from this perspective, are not viewed as just an unfortunate side effect, poorly drafted safety,
but rather as a deliberate, necessary component of a larger strategic system aiming for universal digital tracking and identity.
They eliminate the one common mechanism that allows citizens to step outside the jurisdiction digitally of that absolute centralized digital.
That's the connection the source.
Okay, so it is absolutely crucial then to understand that this restrictive atmosphere we've discussed surrounding case on the Act, it's not just a British peculiarity.
Not at all. The sources you provided confirm that similar, and in some ways even more concerning, legislative efforts are underway in the U.S., providing the American counterpoint to this global trend towards digital control and the erosion of anonymity.
Right. And the specific example we have to look at, highlighted in the material, is Michigan.
Yes, Michigan. A new state bill was introduced there, or proposed, at least aimed, to ban both adult content and, critically for our discussion, the use and sale of VPNs within the state.
Okay, so that confirms the global legislative pattern right there.
It does. If you want to enforce a comprehensive ban on certain types of online content, you quickly realize you must also surgically ban the primary tool people use to bypass that content restriction. The logic is inescapable from an enforcement perspective.
The sources also help contextualize this within the, well, often volatile U.S. political landscape, don't they? Mentioning the constant yo-yo effect.
Yes, particularly at the federal level. The observation is that nationally, whoever holds power often spends their first few years trying to undo or walk back the executive orders and regulations put in place by the previous administration from the opposite party.
Which leads to a kind of political stagnation on big federal laws.
Often, yes. It means that while comprehensive federal laws on things like internet regulation often stall or get watered down, these more extreme, ideologically driven proposals are continually introduced and revisited at the state level.
Like the Michigan bill.
Exactly. It keeps the conversation about surveillance, censorship, and control constantly alive, bubbling up from different states.
But this particular Michigan bill, the one detailed in the sources, it sounds like it's anything but standard fare, even for a state-level proposal.
Oh, it's incredibly aggressive. It's a comprehensive piece of legislation that truly underscores the extent of the political imagination, perhaps, when it comes to regulating both online morality and the internet itself. Hashtag tag 3.2, detailing the Anti-Corruption of Public Morals Act.
Let's get into the specifics then. This bill, proposed back on September 11th by 6 Republican representatives in Michigan, it's actually titled the Anti-Corruption of Public Morals Act.
The name itself is quite a statement, isn't it?
It really is. It signals a moral crusade pretty explicitly rather than just a technical or commercial or even a standard security regulation.
And it's described in the source material using terms like particularly far-reaching and comprehensive.
Well, far-reaching.
Well, here's a key difference from some other state bills that might narrowly target, say, preventing minors from accessing certain sites or regulating specific online services. This Michigan bill is designed to apply to all Michigan residents.
All residents, adults included.
Adults or children, without exception, according to the description.
Okay, that's a major step. It means the state is asserting the right to regulate the private digital behavior of its entire adult population, not just shielding its minors.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
The government positions itself as the morality regulator for every citizen's private computer use, regardless of their age, which is a profound claim of authority. Hashtag tag 3.3, the content ban scope.
Now, let's talk about the content this bill attempts to ban, because this is where the scope seems to go from just broad to, well, truly stunning and maybe politically revealing.
It really does. This isn't simply about banning traditional hardcore pornography, which is often the focus of such bills.
No.
The bill, as described, bans a wide variety of online adult content using very broad strokes.
Okay. What specific examples are cited in our sources? These are usually illuminating.
They are, because they go far beyond easily categorized adult material. The ban reportedly targets things like ASMR.
ASMR, the whispering.
Autonomous sensory meridian response, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, while some forms of ASMR content are certainly sexualized online,
Sure.
the phenomenon itself is primarily a complex sensory experience involving gentle sounds, whispering, tapping, sometimes used for relaxation or sleep aid by millions of people.
So its inclusion highlights how broadly the language might be drafted.
Exactly. It potentially targets vast swaths of benign audio or video content simply because some segments have sexual connotation or because the regulators don't understand it.
What else?
It also reportedly targets adult manga.
Okay, Japanese comics, that's a huge category.
Mass, complex category of Japanese comics and graphic novels, ranging widely in style and content, much of which is culturally specific and not necessarily equivalent to Western pornography.
Right. Any other examples?
It targets AI-generated content.
Ah, the new frontier.
Which just opens a massive regulatory can of worms. How do you even define
AI content that is deemed morally corrupt. It's a technical and legal minefield.
Probably impossible to enforce.
But perhaps the most jarring and certainly the most politically charged item on that list of banned content is the proposed ban on any depiction of transgender people.
Any depiction.
That's the language cited.
Yeah.
We have to pause here because this is a core insight into the bill's potential motive, going beyond just standard obscenity concern.
This isn't a technical restriction based on, say, explicitness?
No, this appears to be an explicit ideological ban, a piece of mandated moral policing targeting a specific group identity folded into what is ostensibly a content moderation and filtering bill.
It suggests the true goal might be less about regulating harmful content and more about enforcing a specific ideology.
That's certainly how critics would interpret that provision. It seems aimed at ideological cleansing of the internet within Michigan's borders.
Okay, and tying this back to our core topic, VPN, how do they fit into this Michigan bill?
Well, the bill, as described, seeks to ban all use and sale of VPNs.
All use, not just for accessing the banned content.
All use, regardless of origin, whether they are foreign-based VPN services or U.S.-produced ones.
So the representatives pushing this bill, they clearly understand the connection we discussed earlier.
Oh, they're smart enough to understand the mechanics. If you want to enforce a comprehensive, ideologically driven content ban like this,
you have to block the escape.
You absolutely must surgically remove the tools that allow users to easily view that banned content or bypass the state's mandated filter or access information from outside the state's control.
So under this bill, if you're an adult in Michigan, maybe using a VPN completely legitimate, say, to securely handle sensitive corporate emails while working from home.
Or maybe you're a developer accessing global software testing environments.
Or you just want to stream European football matches that aren't available.
Right. This bill attempts to criminalize your daily, legitimate digital activity. Why? Because the tool you are using could also be used by someone else to view banned content like AI pornography or adult manga, or, critically, information about transgender identities.
The legitimate, essential utility of the tool is completely overridden by the potential for its misuse, according to the state's moral code.
That's the logic of the ban, yes. Collateral damage to legitimate use is deemed acceptable to achieve total content control. Hashtag tag 3.4 enforcement and penalty.
Okay, so how would a state like Michigan even enforce such a sweeping ban on both content and VPN? The mechanism of enforcement outlined in the bill. That's where the true heavy-handed reality of this proposed state control really emerges.
It is. The enforcement responsibility, according to the sources, falls squarely on the shoulders of the internet service providers, the ISP.
So Comcast, AT&T, Spectrum, whoever provides your home fiber or cable.
Exactly. They would be charged with the, frankly, almost unworkable task of detecting and then blocking VPN use for all their Michigan customers.
That sounds like a massive technical burden. How would they even?
It's incredibly invasive and technically very difficult. To reliably detect modern encrypted VPN traffic, an ISP would likely have to engage in something called deep packet inspection, or DPI.
Packet inspection, what's that?
It means analyzing the metadata and sometimes even the content of every single data packet flowing through their network to identify the specific digital signatures of VPN tunnel traffic.
That sounds extremely expensive for the ISP.
Very expensive. And it represents a fundamental violation of user privacy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The ISP is essentially monitoring the structure, if not the content, of all your traffic, regardless of whether you're actually using a VPN or not. Just check if you are.
It's surveillance baked into the very backbone of the internet connection to your home.
That's one way to look at it, yes. Forcing private companies to act as the morality police and surveillance arm for the state.
And the bill doesn't stop at just blocking usage, right?
No. Furthermore, the bill explicitly bans the sale of VPNs within the state of Michigan.
So if you're a VPN company trying to sell subscriptions online to Michigan residents.
Illegal. Or if you're a retail store selling prepaid VPN subscription cards. Also.
What about the penalty to this?
Oh, yes. The financial penalty for noncompliance by ISPs or sellers is described as massive. Associated fines could be up to $500,000, $500,000.
Yes.
That kind of number ensures that ISPs and retailers will prioritize compliance immediately, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
To avoid catastrophic financial. They're not likely to fight it.
No, they'd likely just implement the blocks, however imperfect, to cover themselves.
Precisely. And crucially, the sources point out the legislative trap embedded in the bill's language. It's quite clever in a way.
How so?
The law reportedly targets not only VPNs by name, but also any method of bypassing internet filters or restrictions.
Catch-off phrase.
Exactly. That phrase is designed to be future-proof. So any new technology that might be developed tomorrow to circumvent censorship, maybe new types of DNS resolvers, specialized proxy servers, anonymity-focused browsers like Tor, or even clever homegrown solutions.
They could all potentially be criminalized under this single stroke.
Potentially, yeah. It demonstrates a desire not just to ban today's tools, but to achieve comprehensive, total, and lasting digital control over access to information within the state's border. Hashtag Attach 3.5 existing surveillance reality. Contextualizing the...
Okay, this legislative pressure to ban privacy tools, it really only makes sense or feels urgent to proponents if we first acknowledge the sheer level of surveillance and tracking that already exists on this end-stage internet.
That's a very important point. The source material provides some really sobering anecdotes that justify exactly why anyone, regardless of their content viewing habits, might feel the need for a VPN in the first place.
It's not just about hiding illicit activity.
Not at all. For many, it's simply a defensive measure against pervasive existing surveillance.
The reality, as painted by the source, is that the internet infrastructure we use every day is already riddled with corporate and potentially governmental spyware.
Absolutely. Our sources went so far as to characterize something as fundamental as the Windows 11 operating system as essentially being spyware that runs your computer.
That's a strong claim. Why?
Because these modern operating systems are often designed from the ground up to continuously harvest massive amounts of telemetry diagnostic data, usage patterns, user activity data, and report it back to centralized servers run by the corporation.
So surveillance is the default assumption baked into the OS.
It often seems that way. Privacy is opt-out if it's truly possible at all, rather than opt-in.
And the tracking is incredibly sophisticated and pervasive, isn't it? We hear these chilling examples.
Like the one about Google products tracking your searches.
Right. Tell us about that.
The system can apparently track if you search for something specific on your phone or computer, and then shortly after, deliver a targeted advertisement for that exact product or service on your living room television, provided those devices are connected to the same home Wi-Fi net, the same IP.
Wow. So they are actively connecting your seemingly private search activity on one device to your public or semi-public entertainment consumption on another device home.
That's the level of cross-device algorithmic profiling that's happening. It demonstrates the incredibly comprehensive digital map that you're building of your interests, your intentions, your entire life.
And this is exactly why the simple act of using a VPN provides a necessary immediate shield for many.
It does. The VPN essentially scrambles that home IP connection point. It makes your internet traffic appear to originate from a completely different, often shared neutral IP address run by the VPN provider.
Breaking that link between your different devices and activities.
Exactly. Confuses the trackers. It introduces noise into their perfect data collection system.
The source shared a hilarious but highly instructive anecdote related to this, didn't they? About using a Roku TV while connected to a VPN.
Yes. They started receiving television commercials during streaming for political elections happening in states where the user absolutely could not possibly vote, like on the other side of the country.
Because the VPN was spoofing their location to that state.
Precisely.
Yeah.
The VPN was successfully confusing the highly sophisticated, geographically targeted advertising algorithms.
So the ad system, despite all its complexity,
it was receiving conflicting data, a user profile maybe suggesting they lived in California, but an IP address suddenly appearing from Florida.
Yeah.
And it just sort of gave up, delivering irrelevant ads for the Florida election.
That small, funny story is actually incredibly revealing.
It's incredibly revealing and almost reassuring in a way. It shows that the system, for all its billions of dollars in investment and sophistication, can still be relatively easily confused by a simple, widely available privacy tool like a VPN. It proves that the aggressive push to ban VPN isn't necessarily about stopping every single bad actor online, because determined actors will always find ways.
What's it about, though?
It might be more about eliminating the one common thing that prevents the entire system from achieving 100% targeting efficiency and total surveillance fidelity across the entire population.
If these bills succeed, if VPNs are effectively banned or blocked, that momentary confusion, that little bit of noise offered by the VPN will be gone forever.
And the tracking system becomes potentially flawless, gapeless in its knowledge of your online life. That's the end game described.
Okay, let's pivot now slightly. We've talked about the formal legislative attempts, these dramatic bills in Michigan, but the sources speculate that a total, outright, legally enshrined ban might not even be necessary for VPNs to functionally die out or become unusable in major markets.
That's a really important, maybe more insidious point they raise. Even if an outright ban like the Michigan bill gets struck down in court due to, say, First Amendment challenges or Commerce Clause issues.
Which is possible.
It's possible. Even then, the prediction outlined is that powerful corporations could still be pressured, or perhaps, as the sources delicately phrased it, palms were greased.
Meaning financial incentives or backroom deals.
Potentially. Pressured or incentivized into blocking VPNs voluntarily, without a direct law forcing.
How would that work? Who are the weak links here?
The weak links in the internet infrastructure, the potential points of control, are the intermediary, primarily the internet service providers, ISPs, and the web hosting providers.
The companies that connect us to the internet and the companies that host the website.
Exactly. They are the gatekeepers. They control the pipes and the servers.
And the sources speculate that ISPs might just voluntarily stop allowing VPN traffic.
Why? Simply to err on the side of caution, as one source put it, driven primarily by financial risk aversion rather than a direct legal mandate.
So they'd block VPNs to avoid getting sued.
Precisely. They would do this to avoid the potentially massive legal liability associated with being seen as facilitating access to illegal content, or even just legally restricted but controversial content, like stuff covered by the UK's age verification rule.
Financial fear and corporate timidity can be just as effective at enforcing censorship as an actual state law then.
In many cases, even more effective, because it happens quietly, without public debate or legislative process. It's a corporate policy decision, not a law.
We have to remember, too, particularly in the U.S., laws like the DMCA, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, already give massive corporations tremendous leverage over smaller hosting providers, don't they?
Absolutely. The DMCA sets up a system, the safe harbor provision, where if a web host receives a copyright infringement complaint, a takedown notice, they're strongly incentivized to remove the content immediately or take the site down to avoid losing their legal immunity and potentially facing a much larger, very expensive lawsuit themselves. Often they do this without thoroughly investigating the validity of the claim first. It's cheaper and safer for the host to just comply.
And we have a perfect and really quite devastating anecdote from the source material that illustrates exactly how, guts, as the source put it, and fearful these web hosting providers can be when faced with direct corporate legal threats.
Yes, this story really illustrates the chilling effect perfectly. It's a classic example of corporate legal bullying triumphing over any sense of due process for the actual user or customer.
Tell us the story. #tag 4 point. An anecdote of corporate buckling.
Okay. The story involves a website, fan site, or news site of some kind that had been operating successfully apparently for about 15 years. So a long-standing presence online.
Right.
They posted some leaked toy designs, specifically designs for upcoming Monster High toy, which is a brand owned by the massive toy company Mattel.
Okay, where did they get the leaks from?
Apparently, they were sourced from a public forum, so they were already circulating out there. The website just aggregated or reported on them.
What happened?
Mattel's undoubtedly large and well-funded legal contacted the website's web host direct. They didn't contact the site owner first. They went straight to the company providing the service.
Okay, standard DMCA tactic, perhaps.
But the crucial and frankly terrifying detail is how the host reacted. According to the source, the host immediately bucked, completely caved.
What did they do?
They shut down the entire website, took it completely offline. 15 years of archives, community, content just gone dark.
Without even talking to the site owner first.
Without contacting the site owners first, and maybe just ask them to remove the specific images that Mattel objected to.
Yeah.
Which would have been the reasonable, proportionate response.
Wow.
The host only later informed the site owners, apparently quite casually, that their site had been down all day because of this complaint from Mattel.
The site owners must have been furious.
Rightly furious, yes, because they lost traffic, potentially revenue, and more importantly, because the host acted purely out of fear of legal backlash from a giant corporation. They shut down a long-standing small business without verification, without communication, without any due warning.
So the source accurately characterized that host as gutless.
It seems a fair description of prioritizing self-preservation over customer rights or fairness.
And what was the ultimate outcome of this corporate buck? Did the site come back?
It seems they did eventually, but the experience was telling. The site owners made the strategic decision, according to the source, to move all of their website hosting offshore.
Why offshore?
Specifically to avoid U.S. laws and jurisdiction, particularly the ease with which corporations can exert pressure via the DMCA takedown system on U.S.-based hosts.
That anecdote demonstrates a profound reality, doesn't it?
It does. If enough financial or legal pressure is applied to these crucial intermediaries, the web hosts, the ISPs, maybe even DNS providers,
they will often fold every time.
Very often, yes. Regardless of the user's potential right to free speech, fair use, or due process, their business model depends on avoiding costly legal fights.
This is the death by 1,000 cuts for the open internet. Quiet deplatforming driven by corporate fear.
That's certainly one interpretation of the dynamic described. #tag 4.3, the 5-year prediction, and public acceptance.
Okay, so If these trends continue, as the sources describe, you've got the legislative pressure from things like OSA and the Michigan bill. You've got corporations buckling under legal threats, and you've got the steady rise of digital ID systems. The sources provide a pretty sobering and actually quite imminent timeline for where this might lead.
They do. The prediction offered is stark. Privacy on the internet, as we've known it, will be mostly dead within 5 years.
5 years, that's very
soon. If corporations and governments continue down their current path unchallenged.
And this isn't just about privacy being slightly curtailed or harder to achieve. The phrase is mostly dead.
Yeah, which implies that the tools and techniques for achieving genuine online privacy might still technically exist, but they will be so difficult to access, so risky to use, or so legally gray
that the vast majority of average users will simply give up.
Exactly. They'll accept the monitored environment as the price of admission to the online world. Privacy becomes a niche, potentially dangerous pursuit rather than a default right.
And this slow change, this gradual erosion, is the key mechanism.
It seems the analogy used in the material. Temperature has been turned up very slowly over the last 10.
Leading to a dangerous public complaint, the classic boiling frog scenario.
Precise. People have been slowly conditioned, step by step, to just kind of accept that if they want to be online, use social media, access services, participate in modern life, they simply have to give up all their privacy and it becomes normalized.
This psychological conditioning, this normalization of surveillance, it ties back perfectly to that narrative the authorities and sometimes the media rely on.
Which narrative?
The pervasive belief, often pushed implicitly that only bad people use VPNs because they must have something to hide.
The privacy is suspicious argument.
It's a fundamental misunderstanding or perhaps a deliberate mischaracterization of the inherent value of privacy.
Absolutely. This narrative completely fails to acknowledge the simple, foundational human desire for privacy. Privacy in thought, in communication, in exploration, in association. It's not about hiding crime. It's about personal autonomy and dignity.
But the narrative deliberately equates privacy with criminality or nefarious intent.
It does. And if the general public buys into this narrative, if they believe that only criminals or terrorists need tools like VPNs or strong encryption,
then they will offer no resistance when those tools designed for everyone's privacy are systematically restricted or removed.
Exactly. This public acceptance, or perhaps just apathy born from resignation, is the final crucial piece of the puzzle for achieving that fully tracked, fully compliant, end-stage internet the sources warn about.
So if the current trajectory really does truly hostile digital environment, comprehensive blob of spyware enforced by both state and corporate power, then what's the reaction? What's the escape hatch? Our source material ends on a really fascinating, though perhaps speculative, concept.
Yes, the potential necessity or maybe the emergent desire for building a new internet, or at least a different kind of digital space.
A new internet, what does that look like?
Well, the concept is explicitly inspired, according to the source, by ideas found in cyberpunk fiction.
Ah, okay. Gibson, Stevenson, that whole genre.
Right, where the original corporate-controlled network, the Matrix or the metaverse, became so corrupted, so surveilled, so unusable for genuine freedom that hackers and communities built a new network alongside or underneath it.
A truly parallel network, free from the constraints and the tracking mechanisms of the old one.
That's the idea, and the source makes a really crucial distinction. This proposal, this idea, isn't talking about the dark web as most people understand it. Inaccessible, technically difficult, often associated with criminal activity.
Okay, so not Tor hidden service necessarily.
Not necessarily or not exclusively. It's the broader idea of building a parallel internet that is potentially accessible to anybody with the right tools or knowledge, but functions conceptually much more like the internet did, say, 20 years ago.
How so? Like the internet of 2002 or 2004?
Yeah. Before the massive centralization by social media giants, before ubiquitous mobile tracking, before AI-driven behavioral analysis became standard operating procedure, an internet built on different protocols, perhaps, with privacy and decentralization baked in.
Okay, how would you actually achieve something like that? It sounds like a monumental task.
It is. To achieve this, you'd need two things, broadly speaking, based on the source's thinking. First, you'd need that massive community-driven effort towards a truly decentralized parallel.
What would that involve?
New protocols, maybe, new routing solutions, community-run infrastructure servers, nodes that don't rely on the major ISPs or US-based cloud providers or legal systems subject to DMCA and government subpoenas.
That sounds incredibly difficult, a gargantuan undertaking.
It absolutely is. Maybe idealistic, but that's the grand vision.
What's the second, maybe more achievable response mentioned?
The second, more immediate, more personal response is the strategic retreat, the creation of the walled garden.
A walled garden, like AOL back in the day?
Sort of, but self-controlled.
Yeah.
This is the idea of individual or small group strategic isolation. The source shared a personal example they were considering building their own walled garden.
What would that entail?
Essentially a self-hosted platform, maybe running off a Linux server in their home or hosted in a privacy-respecting jurisdiction, something deliberately isolated from the rest of the tracking internet.
And intentionally run like it's 2002.
Exact. Run using older, simpler protocols, perhaps. Minimalist design, no tracking scripts, strict control over who has access.
So a walled garden is basically a small private internet where the creator controls the data entirely.
Controls the data, controls the access, controls the rule, and specifically avoids those corporate and governmental pressure points we discussed, avoiding U.S. web hosts, avoiding major social platforms, avoiding services known for surveillance.
It's a strategic retreat, then, designed to preserve the original ethos of a more open, less controlled web, at least within your own.
And crucially, to ensure that your activity within that garden is entirely disconnected from the all-seeing eye of the digital number, the universal ID.
And that idea itself, building your own isolated space, it feels like the ultimate response to the threat of that.
It is. If the argument is that you cannot function in the official tracked internet without their digital number,
then you build an entire environment where that number is irrelevant, meaning
an environment that values the right to be a ghost online, at least within its own walls. It's a fascinating, if perhaps ultimately limited, form of resistance. # tag outro.
Okay, wow. We've taken a really deep dive today into source material that highlights a powerful and frankly quite concerning unified global trend.
It really paints a coherent picture, doesn't it? The battles over the UK's Online Safety Act and these highly restrictive bills like the one proposed in Michigan, they're clearly not just isolated political skirmishes happening in different countries.
No, they feel like pieces of a single, coherent, and rapidly accelerating movement. And the target seems to be the systematic elimination of online anonymity.
We've seen the specific tools being deployed, as outlined in the sources. You have mandatory digital IDs being tied to age verification systems.
Yay.
You have ideologically motivated content bans that sweep up everything from political debate and health information to things like ASMR or depictions of certain identities.
And critically, the direct legal restriction or criminalization of essential privacy tools, most notably VPNs.
Exactly. So the fight over VPNs, it really feels like a proxy war, doesn't it? It's ultimately a battle over the implementation of universal digital ID systems and the architecture of comprehensive algorithmic surveillance.
The stakes really couldn't be higher, could they?
It feels like we are talking about the fundamental integrity of the internet as a truly free platform for free speech, for political organizing, for private inquiry, for just being yourself without being constantly watched and judged.
And the speed at which these legislative ideas are moving, both in the UK and the US examples.
And then maybe just as importantly, the speed at which corporations like that web host seem willing to buckle under pressure.
It suggests that the window for effectively resisting this fully tracked environment might be rapidly closing.
That's the urgency conveyed in the material, yes.
Which raises a final, really important question for you, the listener, to consider as you digest all this. If this legislative path continues down this, if we end up in a world where non-commercial vital information sites like Wikipedia stand firm on principle and are potentially blocked by governments as a result, and where accessing basic political debate or essential health information online requires you to pass through an intrusive aid tied to your digital ID, what becomes the real ultimate cost of this mandated safety?
Yeah, what is the trade-off we're actually making? Is the loss of privacy simply the unavoidable price of entry for the modern web now? Is it just the cost we have to pay for convenience and access?
Or will the collective realization of what's being lost, the right to anonymity, the freedom from constant judgment, finally spark the kind of public outrage necessary to push back, or even to build that truly parallel internet the sources speculate about?
A space where privacy isn't just a feature you hope for, but is actually baked into the fundamental code, not just a temporary luxury granted or withheld by a corporation or a government.
The answer to that, however, will like find of